It passes.
Thank you, Madam President, and members of the board.
All right, moving on to in-a-zone transfer timeline.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. And I think you've already heard the presentation. At the last board meeting in December, it did not have an end date. We need an end date. We did I made an administrative decision to just publish on the website that we were extending, and the application for transfer deadline be extended to February 16th with the lottery on March 1st, 2018.
Can I have a motion?
So move.
And a second?
Second.
Okay. Is there any discussion?
I'm sorry, I'm catching up because I'm trying to use my new book.
12, section F. 12, tab
This is
F.
a great, by the way,
Yes.
thank you.
You're
But I'm just not used to it.
Yeah.
Okay. And I know this is what we all talked about, and
Yeah.
So it's procedural more than anything.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, so I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It passes.
Thank you. Do you want me to move on to the next one?
Please.
So now we're at the last action item, which is the reallocation of 2017 GO bond funds for Milagro Middle School. And representing the CRC is Mr. Cliff Reese, and Mr. Leo, I lost your last name. That. Thank you for being here tonight. Ms. Christy Wagner-Yanda was unable to be here due to family emergency, but we're in very good hands, and so I'm going to ask Mr. Reese to start the presentation.
Is your mic on?
Now it is. Too loud, sorry. Thank you, Superintendent. Board President Price, members of the board, Superintendent Garcia. My name is Cliff Reese. I'm a member of the Citizen Review Committee, which we refer to by the acronym CRC. I have been a member since March of 2015. We currently don't have a chair because our previous chair seems to have moved on to other activities, although he's still, fortunately for us, involved very much with the school district. So congratulations to Board Member Garcia for his appointment. I was asked, because I made the motion at our last CRC meeting on December 13th of 2017, to present this recommendation that the CRC made unanimously to the board. And the motion was to accept staff recommendations to approve $2.5 million from the contingency funds, the $5 million or so contingency fund set aside from the 2017 general obligation bond that was approved, as you know, in March of 2017, that we reallocate approximately half of the contingency to the new Milagro School construction line item. This was discussed in great detail and passed unanimously by the CRC for your consideration this evening. Let me just say, when I joined the board, the CRC rather, in 2015, this was one of the first items that we took up, and we have had many discussions over the last almost 3 years about the construction of the new Milagro School. So this is an issue that we have given great attention to, including visits to the old DeVargas school site where the new Milagro is being prepared to be built, and to Capshaw, and extensive discussion and extensive input from the public on the construction of the new Milagro building. The staff made a recommendation to us, and we took this up December 13th, 2017, and there were several considerations that we gave to our recommendation that we're presenting to you tonight. One, just a little bit of background, a little reminder that the original construction project was to renovate and do some new construction at the current site where DeVargas was located. For reasons that I'll get into in a second, this ended up becoming changed. And what we now have is 100% new construction, a full rebuild at the site. Part of this was, largely this was because, and there are four things I want to bring up. This is the first, that there were soil reports that were prepared and done that indicated that the existing, the now torn down building, the old De Vargas, was actually built on a potentially unstable soil site, and that it would be irresponsible for us to recommend to the board, or for the board to build using the original plan because of the unreliability of the site. This wasn't easy to accept, by the way, for me personally. I personally felt very strongly that we should keep to the original amount that had been proposed, and you have that, I believe, in your materials, a sheet that has the numbers for the various projects. The original amount for the new Milagro was $27,800,000 approximately. So we're proposing to increase this to $30,300,000 approximately. But the rebuild was just not, the partial rebuild just was not feasible from any responsible standpoint. Also, we've had further discussion about the middle school program itself that will be presented, offered at the new school. And this resulted in an increase in square footage as well, which of course increased the costs. We also have applied, and we really need to thank our CRC member Lisa Randall for the tremendous input that she provides us. We applied our sustainable design guidelines to the project. So the new school will include geothermal heat pumps, preparation for solar, water catchment, and LED lighting. Now, all of these add to the cost, but in the long run, we will retain those, or we will regain those costs because it will result in a much more efficient building once it is occupied. Finally, the square footage price of construction has risen since we looked at this original figure. Staff has told us during our discussions that they believe that the higher square footage pricing may be due to several reasons. One is limited subcontractor availability, also increased costs due to national conditions, and I'm sure we've all been following hurricanes and fires and floods, variety of natural disasters that will influence the price of new construction beyond what we were able to envision 2 or 3 years ago. So the staff has also asked me to add, and I think this is important, that this job, as you know, has been bid competitively, and I think you voted on it earlier this evening, actually, if I understand that agenda item. And that since the 2009 GEO bond cycle and the 2013 GEO bond cycle, the district has been able to save, if you will, or return to the contingency line item $5 million in projects. So most of the projects have come in on time and under budget. And in fact, this is only the second project bid in recent years to come in over budget, which indicates that we may be seeing higher prices in the immediate future, and we may need to adjust project budgets and scope of projects accordingly. So with me, as you know, is Mr. Leo Prenovo, who is the project manager for this particular project, and he's available to answer any questions that you may have, as I would be glad to do so on behalf of the CRC. Thank you for your attention. We're glad to stand for questions.
Are there any, oh, okay. First Board Member Carrillo, and then Vice President Cashman.
The first thing I'd like to do is to make the motion to approve, and I know there's going to be, for purposes of discussion, I know there's going to be questions of Leo and Cliff, but first a motion to approve.
It's been moved and seconded. Rudy seconded. Are there any, Board Member Cashman?
Yeah, yes, I'd like to make sure that the board members know that CRC unanimously approved this $2.5 million reallocation. However, I do want to say, because both Board Member Carrillo and I sit as board members on CRC, but we do not vote, this will not probably be the last reallocation that we will need for Milagro Middle School. There was a lot of discussion on, do we scale back the building? Do we scale back what we do in it to bring it within the budget? Both Board Member Carrillo and I have been around for a long time, him longer as a board member, myself longer as a CRC member. When we start to cut projects on, or start to cut costs and say, make it work for this dollar amount instead of, here's the program, build to what we need, we get into situations, and I hate to keep on bringing up Agua Fria, but that probably everybody knows. We sunk millions upon millions of dollars into it, and we still ended up building a new building. So it's better for us to do it right than to cut costs. The other thing, I think everyone knows, especially the three longest-sitting board members know, to do this new middle school was a very difficult decision for the community. There was very little community. I mean, I probably heard 5 people that supported consolidating, but we felt this was the right thing for all of our kids and not some of our kids. We promised this community we would build them a quality middle school that could function for the program. We need to go ahead and approve this reallocation tonight.
I have a motion and, you lagged me.
Sorry. Cliff Reese, very good job in your presentation. You did an excellent job, thank you. One of the issues I've had for many, many years, I've sat on the Citizens Review Committee for 12, 13 years now, and is just, whenever we hire an architectural firm for designing for a certain budget, we actually should, that architectural firm should be hiring that, they should be designing that for that actual budget we have. I know in the past, whenever there's different staff members here, we had a construction management team back in when we were building the new Agua Fria School, excuse me. Camino Royale, and I don't actually like to, now we actually do project management in-house, and Christie's staff actually does an excellent job of making sure that the schools are within budget, as whenever they get designed for a certain amount, whenever the construction comes in. So Christie, you can let Christie know, she's probably home watching. I give kudos to her.
She
her
actually
staff.
is watching.
And another thing is I would like to know is, so there's going to be an additional, we're already seeing more costs coming in. Like as Board Member Cashman said, this is the first time we're going to come in and ask for say, hopefully not a change order coming in.
I don't know that, sorry, Superintendent Garcia, Board President Price, members of the board, I don't see that there will be any extra cost other than, in construction with change orders. This $2.5 million ad is going to pick up the alternate, that's the football field. So there may be extra costs, but I don't foresee them.
Were you done?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Board Member Carrillo?
I wouldn't doubt it. I don't think there's going to be change orders or costs related to change orders. My anticipation is that because of the largest fire in California history and the number of homes that were destroyed, I think that's going to, and I know we've got bids done, but there are certain things that could happen relative to just construction costs, the availability of subs and things like that. And I mean, I wouldn't doubt it if you had to come back to us, and it's fine with me because I know that Christie and her team and you and everyone's done their due diligence. Rudy, I know that sometimes you're on those committees that choose the the bids, right? And I'm comfortable in also knowing that once these things happen, and I just have to look back to Christie and the team, and Leo, I'm not sure, did you have Nina or El Camino? Which one of those was yours?
El Camino.
So you had El Camino, and then, I just forgot her name. Melissa had probably then Nina. And who had Atalaya?
Marissa.
Marissa had Atalaya. All of those came in under budget and on time. So, I mean, I have complete confidence in our district and our different management teams to do everything possible that this is treated the same way.
Just on that note, I totally agree that there are change orders, but just always keep in mind, whenever that contractor bids that project for $26 million, $32 million, $7 million, he actually should do the due diligence, look out there and say, hey, we don't have subcontracts that are valid, or we don't have, because of the hurricanes in Puerto Rico, because the fires now in California, it's that contractor's responsibility to bring that within the budget which he proposed, but obviously change orders do happen. Just FYI, thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes.
Thank you, members of the board. I want to thank Mr. Preveno and Mr. Reese. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very
And-
much.
And Ms. Christie Wagner-Yanda, watching in TV land, thank you also for bringing this home. Appreciate it.
Now I'm moving on to my favorite part of the agenda, board discussion and possible action. This should keep us here for another 2 hours. So let's start with board discussion A, board response to public forum.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
yes.
Yes. I put this on, I would just briefly talk to it, and I know people won't believe I'll briefly talk to it.
Seeing is believing.
Yeah, right. Some members of the public had asked me, when they get up and we don't respond to them or say, Superintendent, would you look into this? Or, yeah, we really want to discuss this issue. They don't feel heard. However, for those people, and I will be meeting with you this week also, that asked me to bring this up, we also received an email from our attorney, and he felt that that if we propose to change where we engage with the public, we could bring liability to ourselves as a board or to the district. So because of that, even though I'm a little bit more flexible on, I want the public to know how we feel, but because I have an attorney opinion here and I can't, in good conscience, move ahead, I'm going to withdraw that item.
Okay, I just wanted to say, in this, from the attorney, it inaccurately states that I asked the superintendent to make this call and to get this information. This was not initiated by her, this was initiated by me. Okay, I just wanted to make that clarification. Yes, Board Member Carrillo.
I don't let her withdraw. It's a very, just because, you could line up all the attorneys and they're not going to point in the same direction. And also, just because they went to law school, no disrespect intended, doesn't mean they're right. And so, I highlighted different areas. I mean, in terms of the attorney response that we all got, his biggest concern overreaching concern was us making commitments we can't keep, us delving into areas of management, which is not our purview, us engaging in substantive discussion, which we know not to do, and then also us violating OMA. So, I think that your reason for bringing this up is very valid. We hear from people all of the time that they feel like they just left it out in the ether world, and now they don't feel heard. That there's nothing in the OMA that prevents us, or in our own policies, that prevents us from saying, or like I said to the folks tonight, I hope you stay, this is going to be brought up, and we will, we often talk about things in board discussion. To the person that talked about lice. Now, I wrote a note down here that says lice. I want to talk a little more about lice, but I think it's really great on when we were able to say to somebody, and this really happened that time with the people that came from Nye. Remember that night it's like, you know what, I want you to know that we have really heard all of you, because there were like 6 or 7 families, and then we are going to discuss this preliminarily in board discussion, and then we're going to ask the superintendent to look into it. And then they feel like, holy smokes, I mean, thank you, board. I feel better now. And so I circled the word engage in substantive discussion here. We don't need to do that to reassure somebody that they have been heard, and, hey, superintendent, will you please, look into the matter. We never, in my 7 years on the board, I don't recall any board member ever promising or committing the board to anything when we have talked to a person in a public forum. And then we always defer, and not only rightly so, but politely so, to the superintendent in these cases. I don't recall one time in 7 years where any of us has ever said to somebody at the podium anything where we tried to represent that it was the board. So, I mean, I think that Attorney Ortiz's overarching comments here are, don't do anything stupid. You can let them know that they've been heard, and we can look into further action. And I really appreciate, Board Member Cashman, your bringing this up, because I feel it's really important that people get a sense that we are their board.
Since I brought this up, and because of the attorney response to it, I feel that I have to withdraw it. I don't think we can create a situation that's a liability. I will be talking with the people that talked to me about this later on a different meeting, and I will try to explain. I know Board Member Carrillo and I tend to be a little bit more out front, and we want to talk to the people, but I just feel I have to err on the side of caution. I'm not a lawyer, and I have lawyer friends, but it irritates me too when I say, this is what something says, and they say, now, wait a minute. Yeah, it may be what you as a novice thinks it says, but as far as a lawyer, this is what it really means. And so I would prefer that the board err on the side of caution.
Moving on to teacher evaluation, Mr. Green.
He has something to say.
He lagged me again.
Just really quick, I also tend to agree with Mr. Carrillo as well. I think you guys are elected officials. I'm appointed thanks to the board here. And if you're an elected official, the people in your district actually elect you to have the voice for the people that have elected you. And I understand that we have to be cautious of what we say and making no promises to anybody out there that has elected us. So I would tend to agree with Mr. Carrillo as into this is a little, I'd like to look at it a little bit more further. Thank you.
Board Member Carrillo?
Well, it's still on
teacher
her topic.
Oh, please.
No, it's,
Go ahead.
because look at the last paragraph. There are good reasons not to engage in debate or responses during public comment. I don't recall us ever doing that. Union stuff maybe, but not public comment. So I appreciate you wanting to withdraw this. You can't withdraw it because we're already discussing it. I mean, but I appreciate Tony's recommendation, and really I read this as don't do anything stupid that you know is going to violate the OMA.
Thank you. The next one. Oh.
Thank you, President Price. I just want to make a procedural point, which is that if any board member wants to withdraw an item, and I wasn't here for the approval of the agenda, but we can do so at that time, and then it wouldn't be already in discussion, as we are now.
All right. Board Member Carrillo, teacher evaluation.
It starts with a story. Over break, I was hanging out with a parent whose son goes to one of our schools. And we were just, I mean, you know, we have fun, luckily, on other levels, but then sometimes things come around to education because he was concerned about something. And I said, let it roll. And he said, I'm concerned that my son, they were from California, that my son who is in the 7th grade is bringing home work for a 5th grader, when he brings home work at all, and that he rarely brings home any writing assignments. And his education when we were in California had much more rigor. And when he started telling me, I'm like, can you give me like, I don't use the word like, that's not me. Would you please give me an example? And when he told me some of the examples of the few and far between writing, I mean, I was taken aback. And that led me to think, who is monitoring this 7th grade teacher, and relative to teaching 7th grade guidelines, and how much writing homework should be coming home. And I'm not saying I'm an expert in this, because I'm not. And that's why we have Ms. Sink, that's why we have our superintendent. And but I was concerned, because we're always here talking about not just how many kids go through Santa Fe Public Schools and end up with a diploma, but Vice President Cashman brings up all of the time that diploma needs to mean something, and proficiency scores need to mean something. So and that had me thinking, how are we internally, and I know Ms. Mayer had the concern that maybe I was trying to sideline something, and I understand that completely. But I remember that with Dr. Boyd, there were these metrics that we were shown on how teachers are evaluated internally, how principals are evaluated internally. And so I'd be curious, you don't have to answer this right now, but I'd be curious maybe sometime at a study session for us to have a greater understanding. Because obviously, if I want our teachers to have all of the tools they need to be the best teachers they can be, but at the same time, I also don't want to have a 7th grade class dumbed down, okay, where the kids are not getting enough writing. Because, I mean, for me personally, I think the reading and writing is paramount to the most important thing there is. And so that's why I put that on there for teacher evaluation, just to discuss with you and maybe at a later study session, what do we do internally to make sure they have the tools they need to be the best that they can be, and then how are we evaluating them internally.
And so when we have these down as possible action items, is this the pleasure of the board that we have this as a study session? Or is that something that I just get back to Mr. Creel, or how do we?
I think you should just get back to Mr. Carrillo. I've evaluated teachers. I know how teachers are evaluated. I don't need to waste time in a study session being taught how to evaluate a teacher. Vice President.
I want to ask you a question so I make sure that I understand. Was your concern that they were bringing home homework at a lower grade level, or that they weren't bringing home homework at all?
Both.
Okay, and what I want to say...
You always expand on your answers.
I know. I see, I make you give me a quick answer, and then I just move right in. You said both, so I'm now but some teachers do flipped classrooms, so, they may not be bringing home homework. I know when I taught, I didn't send home a lot of homework because I don't want to have the students, if they don't understand what they're doing, end up reinforcing bad practices. So if I, did give work to do, it was, reading or something very specific, but the real academic things that I needed, I wanted to teach those and make sure. So teachers have different levels of how they handle that, and I would not want to mandate something for them. But I agree, we need rigor, but it might be.
Well,
Let me just say that when I was teaching, I got a telephone call from a parent, and she said, you are going to ruin our Easter vacation. You assigned a research paper to my child last week. No English teacher assigns a research paper in a week. Okay, this is what was carried home. And the woman got real irritated with me, and she said, and I called my sister, who is a teacher in Cleveland, Ohio, and she says, that was totally incompetent on your part. And I said, I will believe half of what that child says goes on in your house if you will believe half of what that child says goes on in my classroom. I said, no teacher in their right mind would assign a research paper in a week. What I would have done as a school board member is said to your friend that that friend needs to call the principal. That's their job.
Yeah.
That's what we pay them for.
Yeah.
This,
But what it did is it made me ask the question based on my experience over the years here. Is I'm curious, what are I would never think to tell Superintendent Garcia and Ms. Sink their jobs, but I think it's certainly within my purview to ask, what metrics do we use to evaluate teachers internally? I think that's perfectly within my right as a board member, our right as a board, and to even have a presentation on that so that we can better, so I can better understand.
So my question was this, and this is why one of the reasons that I asked to put possible action. Because you got to remember, there's 5 of you, and then depending on how many of these you bring up, all the other priorities that we have, X amount of study sessions that we have for the rest of the year. I can certainly provide you that answer and provide it for you. And that takes a whole different level of work than it does preparing to present at a study session as we move. We're getting now into budget, so a lot of study sessions will go into finance and so on. So that was my question. I can certainly provide you the answer, but you asked for a study session, so that's why I'm asking the pleasure of the board. Would you like a study session devoted to that? We certainly will do it. If not, we'll get your answer for sure, because I always provide you answers to your questions.
Secretary Noble?
My sense is that we are integrating and updating this subject as part of our strategic plan and looking at metrics which would measure things like the rigor of our curriculum, because that has been something that has risen to the top of the goals that we have. And as we move through, and I guess this is a question for you, Dr. Garcia, as we move through the updating of the strategic plan and into some of the strategies and tactics, do you think this question will be answered and this information will be forthcoming and updated?
Yes and no. I think, this is a very specific question. How are teachers evaluated? And who's evaluating them and who's monitoring this? What's difficult is, anecdotal information is important, and it is, but it does not necessarily represent a trend. And so it's always important to know, like if we talked offline and I knew what school it was, I may know what the problem may be right off the bat. If I'm hearing it from, 'cause sometimes there's certain things that you don't even know that I find out, there's a certain theme and there's a systemic problem. I can tell by the nature of parent complaints that I get. I don't know a lot about this particular situation. Was it a special ed student? And there are, reasons why teachers, you shouldn't be sending homework that is going to be difficult, because you can't necessarily, when I say difficult, that they're learning for the first time, because you can't count that all the parents can help their kids with homework. And so it should be something practicing, it may be reinforcing a skill. There's a whole variety of reasons for the level of homework, and there's a lot of data on the validity of homework and how much time and whether or not it really improves educational outcomes or not. So there's a whole lot to debate about it, but the specific questions you ask, we can answer. I can't say for certain, we are implementing the Common Core. They are very rigorous academic standards. With that said, does it make sense if your entire class, depending on the school community, I don't know which one you're talking about, if the kids are 3 years behind or 2 years behind, you're beating your head against the wall if you're, teaching too far above where your kids are at. So, I mean, there's so many different factors. Is New Mexico behind California? I don't know what community in California we may be. I know, some kids move from here to Arizona and find that, in fact, the standard is a little bit lower. So, there's so many factors. Like I said, I can answer your question, but Ms. Noble, I can't say definitively that how teachers are evaluated would be in the strategic plan, probably not. But in terms of us getting our goal of high proficiency, one of the strategies is to ensure that our teachers are teaching the Common Core, which are rigorous standards. And again, keep in mind, they're aligned to the park.
So it doesn't have to be a study session, I don't care.
Okay.
But I do care that when it comes to budget and the strategic plan, that we're going to talk about mechanisms where we're evaluating principals and teachers internally, giving them the mentorship they need, resources they need. I mean, because all of this relates to budget. And that's why I said to Ms. Mayor, why these are here, because it's the beginning of January, and I don't want another January to go by. So if there's something that we need to do that is much more aggressive, all lowercase, that is much more aggressive relative to observing, mentoring, teaching teachers, same thing with principals, then I want to make sure that that's part of our plan going forward. That's why this is here tonight. It's not to second guess what you're doing or anything.
No,
And we'll
I'm
talk offline, and the minute I tell you the school, you're going to say, oh, I knew that. Yeah, so we're not asking her to do anything. Is that okay with you guys? And she
And
and
I
I
will
can,
follow up.
with me individually.
And then we will look at it in terms of, I think that it is totally legitimate for us to look at it in terms of budget priorities, and then again, professional development always winds up, I know we have a big priority on compensation. And so, we'll see how we're funded this year. We do fund a lot of professional development out of our title programs, and there's been considerable professional development this year, and we want to continue that. But, and then, of course, our new teachers, by law, have to have a certain amount of mentoring, but we'll visit with you, Board Member Carrillo, on that issue.
Your next one is PAR, Peer Assistance and Review.
Oh, okay. And this circles around to peer assistance and review. So I keep all of my books from when we have our national conferences, because I feel like sometimes I learn so much about what other people are doing. And this was something I remember bringing up like 4 years ago. Must have been 4 or 5, because this was from San Diego. And that was the first one I went to, so that was kind of my third year. And it's the idea, remember last year or 2 years ago, it's the Rosa someone decision. Remember? There was the legal decision, is counsel still here, where, what's the definition